I have had experiences of speaking to audiences of different nationalities. And a while ago, quite a while ago, I had to speak in a small town in southern China. And the proposition that I was meant to advocate was that Chinese-European cooperation was a really good thing. And there was an interpreter, in fact 2 interpreters, and a commissar in black pajamas who was listening to my remarks. And I said, not terribly difficult, Europe, China, cooperation, understanding. And as I said that, he got agitated and excited. And I said, understanding, Chinese, European students, old people, young people, heroic workers, struggling together, understanding, friendship. And the more I said understanding and friendship, the more excited he became, and the more passionate the interpretation was. And things went on until finally the commissar presiding the dinner, this was about 30 years ago, was on his feet shouting at me as I was trying to propose goodwill. And so in great nervousness, I sat down and waited for something terrible to come. I said, understanding, friendship, goodwill. And the commissar got to his feet and said in Chinese, and translated faithfully by the interpreters, you are quite right. The great threat to world peace is the Soviet Union. American-Soviet hegemony is a great threat. The guns are trained on you, the guns are trained on us. And afterwards, the interpreters came up to me and said, that was a wonderful speech you made about the Soviet Union. And I said, funny, I don't remember mentioning the Soviet Union. And the interpreters said, we knew what you meant. True story. Now, today things are a bit easier because the imperialism of the English language has given people like me an enormous advantage. But for a high percentage of those in the room, they were struggling with different languages and acquitting themselves to a standard of excellence which is really deeply, deeply impressive. And I want to mention to you, as a person to inquire about, another lawyer who flourished in more than one legal system. And his name was Helmut, a German name, James, a British name, Count von Moltke. And on his mother's side, he came from a famous judicial family in South Africa and England. And on his father's side, it was a famous military and diplomatic aristocratic dynasty. And he qualified for the German bar and also qualified for the English bar. And he practiced for a while at Two Hare Court, which was my chambers in London in the 1990s. And in 1939, sadly, he decided to go back to Germany to try to be useful. And he ended up as a public international lawyer advising the German High Command on questions, classic questions, of public international law. And he wrote with beautiful clarity, and he was energetic, and he was charming. And often those for whom he worked were far superior to him in rank, but he persuaded them of his own point of view. And he wrote to his wife, "Peace is not complacency. Whoever lets black be white and evil good for the sake of outward calm does not deserve peace and is putting his head in the sand. But whoever knows at all times the difference between good and evil and doesn't doubt it, however great the triumph of evil seems to be, has laid the first stone for the overcoming of evil." Now, he was a man who took risks and expressed himself with energy and clarity. I'll offer you 3 examples. One question: should the British ambassador to Switzerland be assassinated by the German army? He said, "I insist on an absolute veto against any further attempt to murder the British ambassador to Switzerland. In particular, it seems to me untenable that requests of this sort should be made. For a junior officer, very young, to express himself with that degree of vehemence called for a bit of courage. Another example. What about people who had served in the armies of defeated countries like Poland, France, or Belgium, and were then taken prisoner wearing the uniform of another army? Now, when they were captured by the Germans, the question arose, were they to be regarded as civilians bearing arms, for which the penalty was death, or were they to be regarded as prisoners of war? And again, there was a fierce debate, and he prevailed. And he was able to write to his wife that a great disaster has been averted, and despite everything, it gives me great satisfaction to think that many non-German women have your husband to thank for the continued existence of their husbands. And the third example related to Soviet prisoners of war. And again, he went back to basic principles. He said, the Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War isn't in force between Germany and the Soviet Union. Therefore, it's the law of international law concerning the treatment of prisoners, which is in force. And these have established since the 18th century that captivity is neither revenge nor punishment, but essentially a security measure, whose sole purpose is to prevent the prisoners from taking any further part in the war. This approach has risen from the view held by all armies that it's contrary to military conceptions to kill or harm the unarmed. It further is consonant with the interests of each combatant nation to save its own soldiers from harm when in captivity. So, again, the lawyer making use of his legal skills to persuade his superiors on the basis of legal analysis and on the basis of enlightened self-interest. He was a young junior officer, and all lawyers from time to time have a duty to lead their clients, lead their superiors, even though it may be inconvenient and unwelcome. We have to teach our clients, not just follow them. Now, of course, his actions took him into danger, and in due course, his luck ran out, and he was imprisoned, and he was accused by the so-called People's Court of high treason. Now, he hadn't done anything except ask questions. He was not a member of any plotter. He wasn't conspiring against Hitler. He was simply asking questions which were inconvenient. As he wrote again to his wife, then from prison, once one man has taken a stand, a surprising number of others will stand as well. But there always has to be one to go first. Otherwise, said he, it doesn't work. And this is what he wrote in January 1945, writing from prison to his wife. It's strange how infinitely many things suddenly depend upon a single decision. Those are the few moments when one man can suddenly count in the history of the world. Everything before, everything that follows, is based on mass, anonymous forces and men. And then suddenly one feels that all these forces are holding their breath, that the gigantic orchestra that has played so far has fallen silent for one or two bars to let the soloist, the solo instrument, set the tune for the next movement. It's only one heartbeat of time, but the one note which will sound out alone and solitary will establish the next movement for the whole orchestra, and all await that tone. Well, Helmut James, Count von Moltke, was strangled with a piece of piano wire in January 1945. And he is an example of what a young, talented, energetic, clear-minded, well-speaking, kind, persuasive, and elegant-tongued public international lawyer can do. He was expert in his field. No one doubted it. He was able to persuade. He could lead his clients. And sometimes, even when it was unpopular, the Admiral would say, "All right," and would sign. So, it's that capacity for leadership, for clarity, and for good analysis that distinguishes the excellent public international lawyer from the average. Of the many professional experiences which I have had, which have been agreeable and stimulating and amusing, the experience of mingling with you, of seeing the bowl last night, of judging some of the rounds, and listening to the skill and the creativity and the analysis, it makes me proud to share the profession with you. You are going to do very well. Congratulations to you all. Thank you.